Coming up on this episode.
When I first opened my business, I was talking to a business consultant and he was like, Larissa, what are some of your business goals?
Yeah.
And I told him my business goal is to be able to cook dinner at least 3 times a week and to pick up drop off my kids at school and pick my kids up from school in the afternoon. And he turned around to me and he said, that's not a business goal. And I told him very clearly, if you don't understand that that's a business goal, number one, you're not the business consultant for me. And number two,
welcome to the Leading Peers podcast. I'm your host, Leo Popik, the founder and CEO of Leading Peers, the community for CEOs to connect, collaborate, and grow. On this show, you will listen to some of the most amazing CEOs share their personal stories and the lessons they've learned along the way about leadership and life. Let's dive in. Today, I'm going to be interviewing Larissa Salvador. She is the CEO and owner of Salvador Law. I am so thrilled to have somebody who is such an amazing entrepreneur, business owner, CEO, mother, friend. Larissa, so happy to have you. And I want to jump right in and tell us briefly, what is Salvador Law, the amazing firm that you've built?
Well, it's so nice to be here too. So Salvador Law is a law firm. I'm a lawyer, but for the next 4 years, I'm a lawyer more so in immigration law. So we deal with a lot of changes with a lot of people's lives at all times, depending on the government. So for people that don't know, immigration law is very volatile depending on how things are going. So this is what I do. I deal with people's lives and futures in the United States.
So you've built this incredible firm that's helping hundreds, if not thousands of people get into the U.S. legally. You've put together an amazing team. And you've done all that while juggling so many other things. I can't wait to get into all of that. Let's start with understanding your origin. I want to get a sense of your identity. So looking back at your childhood, what was a pivotal moment for you? If you had to single out one moment that was the most important inflection point of the first 20 years of your life or so.
It would definitely have to be June 16, 2001. I was 11 years old. And that's when I landed actually in the United States with my family from Brazil. I'm originally from Rio. My family, my dad specifically, had a situation in Brazil that caused us to move to the United States. I thought we were going to Disney, and I thought it was going to be a short trip. Not so. 25 years later, and we're still here. So that move to the U.S. definitely made a huge difference, of course, because I'm from the slums in Rio. And all of a sudden I find myself first in Los Angeles, which was entirely beautiful, entirely safe compared to where I was coming from. It was just, I don't think at that moment I realized how much of a difference that was going to make. And then a few years later, that's when I realized I was 16 and I realized that I was still undocumented in the US. And when I went to figure out why that was, that's when I found out that when my parents went to file for asylum, there was an attorney that didn't have ethics, was not professional, stole all their money. And my dad was actually on the way to the office to make a payment when he got to the place where the office was. And there was like a whole entire alphabet soup taking away files and arresting the officer that was charged and had to serve federal time. For pretty much, stealing all these people's money and it wasn't just a bar complaint, he was extremely unethical. So 16, undocumented, seeing people also go through what I was going through. And at the time, it wasn't something that you were free to talk about. So that moment I decided I'm going to be an immigration attorney because as a kid, you're not responsible for your parents' decisions, but you sure pay for it, especially when you're talking about immigration and parents moving to a different country. So here I am, 25 years later, being an immigration attorney, and I try my hardest, especially to speak to young people, especially to speak to teenagers about, hey, you should know what your legal status is, because once you're 18, your parents are no longer responsible for you, and you won't be able to get any benefits from whatever cases they're doing in the US. So that was pivotal.
Larissa, that's amazing. And I can imagine coming from the slums of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and I've lived in Rio extensively. I know what those slums look like, that for your father to have purchased those plane tickets to come to the US must have been a pretty significant undertaking.
Yeah, it was initially he was like, I'm gonna go and see, because he came first in 1999. And then we followed in 2001 because the situation that my dad was involved, I mean, we started seeing that the thing was not going away, the problem wasn't going away, and involved the authorities in
Wow.
Brazil. So it was like, it's time to go.
Wow. Wow. Larissa, I know that you've been in sports your whole life for the vast majority. How did competing in sports from a young age influence the person you became? Tell us about that sports trajectory. How did you get into it? How did you become a competitive athlete? What that led to as far as accolades and whatnot? And how did that affect the person you are?
So my first sport was soccer. So since I was little, I played soccer. Even on the last day of school, even though there was nothing going on, I would go to school to play soccer. So I've always loved being competitive. I've loved playing games, and I love team sports. I'm a big fan of team sports. So when I came to the US, when I was in high school, I ran cross country and track. So it definitely gets you into a mindset of consistency. You got to be consistent with your training, and you got to train as if you are playing. So that was like my first intensive experience with sports, because in high school, that's what I was doing. And then in the middle of my freshman year, I went into ROTC, which for those that don't know, it's a military program while you're in high school. So there is for the Air Force, the Marine Corps, the Army, and also the Navy. And I was part of a Navy program in Boca Raton. So with that, there was drill that I competed all 4 years. There was athletics also. You had to do push-ups, you had to do sit-ups, you had to run the 100-yard dash, you had to do a quarter-mile relay, and I competed in all of those. And it was funny because being that young and being that into something that it wasn't just a sport, but also very patriotic in the US, it gave me a real sense of belonging to a country that I knew that the federal government was not a big fan of me being at that time.
Wow.
But regardless, it just made me respect it more because of that aspect, because of that side of patriotism and that discipline. And I'll never forget, it was always honor, courage, and commitment. Those were the three pillars of what we did there. And with sports, it kind of just went hand in hand to me. And then when I was in college, I played volleyball, I played soccer, I was a cheerleader. And then later on, that's when I got into jiu-jitsu, and it's what I still do to this day. The year before I had my daughter, I actually became a Pan American champion in jiu-jitsu. The month that I found out that I was pregnant, I found out 2 weeks prior to a huge fight that I was going to have back in Florida. So that having my kids, now I have two. I have a daughter that's 2 and 8 months and a son that's 8 months, hasn't really made me not want to practice sports anymore. it just made me want it even more because I do believe that it gives a great base for anything else that you do because it teaches you discipline. It teaches you something even more important, which is sometimes you're going to train really hard and you might still lose that fight. It doesn't mean that you didn't do your best. It just meant that your best was outbested that day. So what do? You just get better. And that's pretty much something that I've taken into all aspects of my life, even as a mom. I mean, nowadays people are so caught up with internet and all the reels and all the information and all the YouTube channels about how to change a diaper or how to deal with teething and how to do this and that. And I don't watch it. I don't follow it. I'm a very much like, I follow my instincts the same way that I do with fighting. And then if tomorrow I learn something that works better for my situation, I'm not going to be sorry that I did something different yesterday because yesterday I did the best that I could with the information that I had according to my experience. And then today I have a different experience and it's okay to change the way I do things because it's better today, you know? So sports have helped me a lot having this kind of like fluid and not stagnant mindset of like, it's okay. Things are always evolving and so should I, and so should the way that I deal with certain things, as long as they're not, you know, distorting my ethics, my professionalism, my courage, my commitment.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And so jiu-jitsu champion, what are some of the biggest tournaments you ever competed in or biggest titles you won?
So I think Pan American was definitely like my biggest title. And I think the most interesting thing was because I had competed like at small competitions, but that was the first time that I went up against like the big boys because it was for IBJJF, which is the largest league for jiu-jitsu. And I won. And I was like, this is
gold medal.
Exactly. I'm a gold medalist. You know,
that's incredible. That's incredible. That's a hard competition. The Pan American Games. You're competing against the U.S. Were you representing the U.S. or Brazil in that competition?
So for that one, I was already an American citizen.
Okay.
So I was representing my gym that's in Deerfield. Okay. But if you looked where I was born in Rio. So it's cool because it's almost the same as those UFC fighters. They're like fighting out of ATT in Deerfield, but they're from Brazil. So it's cool to be able to wrap both sides of your life that have made you who you are. And my goal for this year is actually, I just started training again. And my goal is to be able to compete again by November and to have my children there because I do believe that it is amazing to be a pattern to them starting now with something like this. Not necessarily because of like women empowerment per se, but I think for my children to be able to see that I still do life because of you. And I didn't stop because of you. Because a lot of people are like, oh, I no longer did this or that because I had children. And the truth is, you no longer did that because you chose no longer to do that because it wasn't important to you anymore. It's not your kid's fault that you no longer do something. And to me, to still be able to like jiu-jitsu and love the, you know, to be on the mat and to train and to go out there and do it, especially after having two kids, especially after going through 2 C-sections and going through all sorts of really high intensity things through my pregnancies, it shows a lot to them about perseverance in the things that you want to do. And that's something that I really want to do.
Wow. What a great segue into what I want to ask you about, which is your life's priorities. What are your life's priorities now? You're 36, you're a business owner, you're a wife, you're a mother of 2 kids. What are your life's priorities right now?
My kids and my family. And actually, it's weird for people to hear it, but it's my husband and then my children. And I've heard a lot of women be criticized about putting their husbands first because your husband can leave you at any moment and your children are forever and I'm like, I truly believe that by taking care of my marriage, my kids have a healthier and happier life at home
Mm.
because they're not trying to navigate tensions between their parents, you know? And no, guys, it does not mean that I love my kids any less or that I don't take care of them. It's just that there is a hierarchy as far as, you know, I would hope and what we plan for is that our children will grow up and leave the house and go on to have a life of their own. And I don't want to have to get reintroduced to my husband 18 years later after my kids are out just because I was so caught up on I'm a mom, I'm a mom, I'm a mom, I'm a mom. And that's not even healthy for the kids, in my humble opinion, anyways,
Well,
because you become like these children obsessed, and the kid doesn't have any liberty of just growing and breathing, or even having both sides. Like, my mom does things this way, and my dad does things a different way. There's no right or wrong, it's just different. I don't believe to be the perfect mom or that my way, it's the only way of doing things to raise my kids.
so Larissa, the husband, then the kids, then the business. And by the way,
Yes.
I have the same order of priorities. That my wife comes right above the kids, and then the kids, then the business. So I'm right there with you. Larissa, you have tremendous faith in yourself. That's something that anybody that knows you can say. I've been watching it. This is why you have a business. This is why you went through hard times with it, why you are a jiu-jitsu champion, why you are a wife and a mom. This tremendous faith that got you through the military, got you through all these competitions, all of entrepreneurship, which is by far the most competitive sport in life.
Yes.
Where does your faith in yourself come from?
Uh, Definitely two places. I think number one, it's my personal belief in God, and I'm not talking about religion. I'm just talking about God and just God. I'm not, I wouldn't say that I'm a religious person because I don't believe in religion as a system, but I do believe in faith, and I do believe that my faith in God has reflected in my belief in myself because the Bible says you got to love yourself. You got to love others like you love yourself. So you need to love yourself first. It's a
Hmm.
basic, super basic principle. And definitely my dad. So my mom has been a great mom, don't get me wrong. But throughout my life, my dad has been extremely present. And that, as a little girl, and now as a woman, having my dad always believe so intensely in my ability, in my capacity, in my potential, and it has been life changing because I look at my mom's experience, and my grandfather wasn't in the picture, and she always tells me, she's like, Larissa, not having your dad makes a huge difference in your ability even to make decisions. And it's funny because yesterday I was talking to my dad on the phone, and he was telling me about something for the business and something that I needed to make a decision on. And he said, you might say, well, Dad, how can you tell me this? You're not rich. How can you talk about money and all this stuff? But I am going to tell you this because I know that the reason why I have lost out on so many opportunities is because I was afraid.
Mm.
Fear has stolen so many great opportunities and so many possibilities because I didn't believe in myself. I didn't have courage. I didn't have anyone to tell me, you can, you will, don't worry, I got you. So today, if there's anything that I could pass on to you in this stage of your life, of your business, is courage. If
Yeah.
you need me to tell you about courage. If you need me to be courage for, I'm here for that.
Wow.
And those two things have made a huge difference, especially with the different things that I have gone through. If it wasn't for these two factors, to be quite honest, I don't think I would even be here today.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So faith in God, and it's based on that Christian principle of the commandment of loving one another like we love ourselves, and then this father figure that you've had so close to you. And I've met your father, and I've seen him in your business, and he's always around and very involved. Are you an only child, Larissa?
Oh no, I am not. My little brother has also taught me survival.
Okay. Okay.
I have a younger brother. He also is in the US. We have been closer, but there have been different things also in life. And also, I believe that the move that we made from Brazil to the US, at that time, nobody talked about, hey, how are you with this transition? Right? People always assume that children are so resilient and you move and they just get used to whatever move that you make. But no one is really seeing the struggles that were going on internally, because in our heads, at least for me, I was fine in Brazil. You know, I went to my grandmother's house all the time. She was a great cook. I had tons of time with my aunts. For those that don't know, I know how to sew. I can make a whole entire dress and pants. That's what I used to do with my aunt and my grandma. And then all of a sudden, I was in a different place, and I didn't have that support group, and I didn't have my family. I didn't have my cousins. And okay, I did well. You know, I went through the transitions, and you can bet your bottom dollar that I paid for therapy later on to deal with whatever wasn't dealt with. But I don't think that he had the same
support system.
And mechanics of getting through that, you know?
Yeah, as somebody who's moved around a lot myself, from one country to another growing up and having siblings as I do, I fully understand each one of my siblings and I have had a very different experience. So I get it. Larissa, I want to get back to your purpose. You know, immigration, you said I picked it at 16 when I realized, you know, my status wasn't, you know, we hadn't been legal all these years, and I realized how important this was. Tell us about immigration. It's such a hot topic in the last few years in the United States and globally. Why is immigration important for the country and for the world?
So I think anyone that has been to Ellis Island in New York, which is that tiny little island right next to the Statue of Liberty that usually people don't even realize is there. If you go there, you will have such an amazing understanding of how modern America was built. Okay. Immigration and migrating and moving from place to place has actually made us into what we are, regardless of where you are, you know, especially in the Western world. If it wasn't for, you know, those colonizers moving across, it would be entirely different. And to negate the need for immigrants, to negate the need for America to have immigrants, it's pretty much negating development, you know, negating a world that's moving forward, because I firmly believe that immigrants make America, you know. And when we're talking about a lot of the talent that we have in the US, in the areas of research, in the areas of IT, you know, tech, it's not just American based. You're not talking about, you know, people born in America. You're talking a lot about Indians. You're talking about Brazilians. You're talking about, you know, Russians and Chinese, Korean. You're talking about the whole entire world.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it has been such a hot topic in the US because the US still is a focus of huge immigration influx.
Yeah.
When you compare the US, and I'm going to speak for, from my own experience, when I compare to the US to Brazil, if you ask me, Larissa, where is the best place to live in the whole entire world? I'm going to tell you that as far as warmth and people, it's Brazil. But when it comes to opportunities and knowing that you're building something, it's the US. And that's what everyone envisions. That's what everyone wants. When you talk about being an entrepreneur in Brazil, if you're an entrepreneur, you are also a business partner with the government because they're going to take most of your earnings and you're left with very little. So they have created this whole entire system that business owners are constantly having to reinvent their business because it gets to a point that they're paying more taxes than they are actually taking anything. So the US is filled with opportunities. Now, the problem is these opportunities have different categories. And even though we live in the world of information with, the internet and Instagram and Facebook, there is still a lot of misconceptions and misinformation surrounding the field of immigration to the United States. So you have people coming through the border and thinking that if I come through the border and they let me in, then I'm in. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, no, you're being let in to answer for a federal crime.
Mm-hmm.
That's it, you know? And then you have the other people that have the ability of coming to the US legally, but then they're hiring people in their own countries that are not really understanding of the system because they sometimes have never even been in the US. So they don't get the help that they need to trace a path to citizenship.
Right.
So you have all these things going on, and it's it's sad in a way what's happening right now because you have a lot of people getting deported, but we also understand that the border is a mess. But
Mm-hmm.
then on the other hand, you have these people that could be coming to the US legally, but they don't have the correct information to do so. And the
Right.
US needs those people because they make American great too. And they bring money to the economy and they also generate, jobs and all. So it's a very thin line
Mm-hmm.
between legally immigrating and all hell breaking loose at the border.
So, Larissa, can arriving illegally into the country ever be morally justifiable?
My
Is it
honest
ever morally
response,
justifiable? Yeah, yeah, that's why we're here. Honest.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. I have seen families, I have seen children. Okay, I represent four boys, and they crossed the border by themselves because they were running away from a gang that had already killed one of their siblings and their cousins.
Hmm.
And they were next. So if anyone can look me in the eye and tell me that they're wrong, I'm going to deeply, respectfully disagree.
And one last question on this topic. The fact that you came the way you came into the country, right? Not knowing at the time that you were illegal, but finding out at 16 that you had been illegal since the age of 11 in the country. How does that affect the way you support your clients today? How do the memories of what you went through as an illegal before you became a U.S. citizen affect the way you support your clients today?
So my family came in with a tourist visa. Then in 6 months it was expired. And then that was when the door closed for the asylum petition that we were going to file because of the attorney. I remember being in my senior year, I was 16, and it finally clicked that even though I was in the top of my class, I was nominated for tons of awards, I was the first female battalion captain of my unit, and it didn't matter.
Mm. Mm.
It just didn't matter. And whenever I have a family come into my office that they cross the border with their children, I usually, and don't get me wrong, I care about all of my clients. But when there are children involved, I have a very serious conversation with the parents. Because at the end of the day, I know that those parents, they're adults. They can handle whatever consequences, and they made a decision.
Mm.
But those kids didn't. They came along for the ride because that's what you do when you're a kid.
Yeah.
And I have to explain to them the pros and cons of their decisions. And I have to explain to them how your decision today, and especially right now, like a lot of clients don't want to show up to their immigration hearings because the government is dismissing the cases so that ICE can arrest them outside and deport them. Mm. Even though some of them, they want to present their case, they want to be heard by the judge. And I have to explain to them, if you don't, I understand all the fear surrounding this. But number one, you have to show up. It's your hearing. But number two, if you don't show up, it's not just a deportation letter for you. It's also for your children.
Wow. Yeah.
And it doesn't matter that they are under 18. The deportation order is for all of them. And then what? What are you going to do? How are they going to go to college? Oh, no, I will pay for them to go to college. Okay, you can pay for them to go to college. And then how do they work in the field that you worked so hard to pay for them to go in college, since they don't have a social security, since they don't have a work permit? Well, but maybe then, they will fall in love with an American citizen and get married. I was like, yes, but because of this order, this deportation, their process, because of how you chose to enter the country, because of this deportation order, their immigration case is never going to be simple. Because by that time, they're going to have to file one part of the case, and then they have to file to try to reopen the case. Then they need to file for a pardon, and then they need to go to their... These are all the things that you're setting. And granted, it might be that whatever situation that you're running away from at home, all of this might still be worth it. But I am morally responsible,
right,
for the information that you need to have before you make that decision. So because of my situation, because of what I went through, I tend to be very honest with my clients about, legally, these are the realities that we deal with today.
Yeah.
But then when I speak to the kids, I tell them, regardless of what your parents choose, I am your possible tomorrow. Because had I given up back when I was 16 and I didn't choose to go to school because, well, why am I going to go to school if I'm going to end up having to clean houses or work doing this or that? But once again, because of my dad was like, opportunities are made. You need to be prepared. You need to be ready for when you can. So don't stop now. Don't let our immigration status stop you from dreaming about more and becoming so much more.
Yeah, it's incredible. That's incredible. And I've migrated and I know what it's like to go through a process, mine being very different from yours, being very different from everybody else's, but of being in that state of limbo and saying, do I still continue to forge ahead with the uncertainties of what will come? It's an incredible story of resilience, and you come out so much more resilient. And I can sense that passion as you're talking to your families. It's clear that what you do is a labor filled with a sense of purpose, which fuels that passion that you have to help people and not just go through the motions of doing your job, but really caring and really advising and looking out for their best interests. Let's talk about that resilience as it applies to business. At some point, you decide I'm going to have my own firm. When was that? What year was that?
So it was 2019, right before the pandemic.
Yeah. So that you were 30 or so at the time, decided to become an entrepreneur right before the pandemic. And let me get to, that business journey of, were there moments that you thought your business wasn't going to survive, that it was just not going to make it through? And how did you push through those moments?
So right when I didn't make necessarily a decision. I was kind of like put in a position that I had to make a choice, right? I had worked previously in a firm that I thought I would still be in today, and then all of a sudden that wasn't the case anymore. And I talk a lot about my dad because he's involved in this a lot. He came to me, he was like, do you still want to work for someone else? Or do you just can you do this on your own? Like, do you know the law? I was like, yes, I know the law. Can you do this? I was like, yes, I can do this. He was like, then why don't you do this on your own?
Wow.
So one day I'm on, Sunbiz, opening a professional association. And then 8 months later, the pandemic hits.
Wow.
And right there and then, I definitely thought I was not going to survive. I was like, I just started a business and the borders were actually essentially closed. So that was the closest the border has ever been. It was during COVID.
Yeah, so there's very, very little demand for your services. You can't meet in person with clients.
No. And it's right when Zoom was, starting to become a thing. How do we use this new technology to kind of deal with the demand that we're having right now? And I remember the SBA loan came out. And I was like, well, let's do this right now to make it work, right? So I did it, and we started picking back up, work started to come back up. But during immigration, and depending on the climate, it can definitely wear you out. So 2023, it was a second time that I was just burnt out. And it wasn't even that I didn't think that my business was going to make it. I didn't think I was going to make it in the business.
Wow.
Because I was just so tired of just constantly putting myself in the place of the immigrant and just being so mad at their quote unquote dumb choices for certain situations that I'm like, I'm telling you this is not going to work. I'm telling you this is going to be bad for you and your family. And you still chose to do what was bad. And that's when you start to realize, the morality of things and how what's morally wrong for me or what doesn't make sense to me because of my situation, because of my experience, might be entirely different to you because your situation, it's entirely different. You're a different person. So then last year, as you so up and close witnessed, I actually, the year before and then intensify last year, I realized that I was taught to be a lawyer. But being a business owner, is an entirely different beast that has nothing to do with the law. Nothing. And it didn't matter how much of the law I knew, I did not know how to healthily run my business for myself. So it definitely took me into this journey of, you know, reevaluating the way that I have been doing business.
Mm.
And then also, when it came time for my son to be born, I was faced with postpartum depression. And it was very hard balancing knowing that I wanted to keep on going with my business, but emotionally not wanting to because I just couldn't,
Mm.
and finding a balance and fighting with myself and the voices in my head on a daily basis to be able to get on to the other side and be able to, come back into the office in my business attire and not feel like I was out of place.
Larissa, so 2 years ago, 2023, when you're having that significant meltdown, is the time that you joined Leading Peers.
Yep.
So I want to ask you about that. You've been in Leading Peers for 2 years, and how would your life be different without it?
So I joined Leading Peers because Josh is a member. Josh and I, we've been friends since 2011. And it's funny because the constant thing that Josh and I have done throughout our friendship was dance together. We would always go out and dance together and dance together. And it's funny because before I met my husband, I would say, I want to find someone that makes me feel in all aspects of my life like Josh makes me feel when we dance. I can close my eyes and I know he's not going to drop me and I'm not going to hit anything. And getting into Leading Peers was kind of finding the husband of businesses that gave me the same feeling that Josh would give me, to be able to navigate something that I had no clue, and just being asked questions that forced me to look hard into what I was doing and not deal with hypotheticals. If you would ask me, oh, how much is your business making? Dude, I don't know. I hate numbers. And because I hated numbers, I used that as an excuse to not deal with the most important part of my business, which was the numbers, And with Leading Peers, it really forced me to take a hard look at that and see, am I leading my business to success, or am I running it like my personal piggy bank into the ground? And I had never asked myself that question because I was like, well, but it's my business. Why would I not use the money from my business? And it's like, yes, that's why you pay yourself. That's why you're an S Corp, So if I hadn't started this journey, if I hadn't allowed myself to trust the process, right? And buy into something that I didn't know, and buy into strangers, because it's still that way today, but my first group, I think there were already 7 of them and I was number 8, and it was all guys.
Yeah.
And for a lot of women, especially, if you come from a women are still trying to find their place in society type of thing, it would be hard to be in the place where you very easily are the smallest fish in the pond. But I truly believe that because of my dad, that never intimidated me, because I wanted to be the average of the room, because that allowed me to get so much more. And to this day, some of the relationships that I have gotten from Leading Peers have played out a bigger role, not only in my business, but even expanding into how I deal with my micro business, which is my family, in a way that I don't think I would have found anywhere else.
Wow. Yeah, so you talked about being the only woman. You've been in 2 different boards, because you were in board number 7. And then at one point, we split board 7 into 7 and 17 when 2 of the members started to overlap in their activity. And you went from being the last person to join a well-established board to being one of the founding members of a small new board. Tell us about the culture you helped to shape in the new board that you started along with very few people. What attributes of the culture of the board that you're in did you help to bring in, and what attributes of the culture of a peer board are most important to you and you want to make sure you maintain over time?
I think when you're in a room filled with guys, it's it's very important as a woman to teach them how to carefully listen.
Mm, mm,
I think that has definitely been my personal input, because sometimes they'll get so carried away with like one word that somebody said, but that was just the word. It wasn't the essence of what was being said. It wasn't the actual problem. And if you listen a little bit more careful, you get beyond the words, right? You
mm,
get to the
mm,
essence of the issue.
mm,
And that has definitely been a amazing thing to watch people learn to closely listen to one another,
mm,
because then you understand that a lot of times whatever business issues you're having to deal with, everyone deals, but the issue that you're having on your end actually comes from something way more personal that a lot of times has nothing to do with just the theoretical or just the application of business rules and business theories. No, it has to do with how you were maybe presented to something when you're younger, or even something that has been definitely important in our board has been realizing how our personal life is affecting our business,
mm,
and being able to openly talk about that without being scared of being judged, or
mm,
without being scared of feeling less than, and especially as a woman, and not being able to have anyone else relate to giving birth.
mm,
It has been extremely important to have a group of men that are willing to listen and not try to fix the problem, because sometimes as a woman you don't need the solution right now, you just need them to listen,
mm,
and you just need them to tell you that it's gonna be fine, and then after you go through that, you can go into the solution. So having people, specifically males in a board, that
mm.
are able to go through that with you as a woman has been an entire, I've never had that experience, outside of my husband that took me a while to import from Brazil, as you know my story.
Yeah.
uh
Mm,
but it has been significantly impactful to have this group and to have this experience, especially like I said, when I am the lowest earning business there, and to have these big guys being
mm.
able to come to where I'm at and help me in that way.
No, it's amazing. I hear so much the importance of listening carefully and listen to understand, not just to pretend to hear the words. And I've been, as of course, the peer board leader for the two boards that you've been in the last couple of years. And as you were talking, I was reflecting that every meeting I've always seen you fully engaged. I've never seen you on your phone. I've never seen you drift off into space. Never seen you take out a computer, and and that type of listening that you look for as an attribute. You exemplify that. You model that, and how important that is. It's really, really incredible being the only woman on the board, and also saying the smaller fish. And when it comes to talking about disadvantage, you've overcome being an immigrant, being black, being having come the way you came, at first illegally. You've overcome being a woman. Everything that somebody could have said, this is why it's hard to make it, you've overcome that, all those layers of disadvantage. And you see that you have to be in a pond with people who can help you get to the next level. There is a lot of humility in that. There's a lot of growth mindset in that. And I just love it. And it's one of the reasons, of course, I picked you to be on the show. I'm such a fan of your mindset, of your ability to envision yourself being capable of so much more. And you talk about where that faith came from. And I found that very revealing earlier. what a great, I think, testament to the value of a father to their children, especially to a daughter, and the value of having some type of belief in a higher power, whatever you decide that higher power is. Larissa, how would you describe your leadership style? How do you lead your team in the company?
Uh, I am a soccer team captain.
Mm, okay.
Like I said, and I think it does have a lot to do with being in sports, but I believe in team. I believe that everything can be accomplished as a team. Although the I am the owner of the team, I I'm so aware that I can't do it without them, that I love to involve them as much as possible into the success of the the business, but in an active way. So I'm very transparent about, hey, what are the issues that you guys think we have right now? And what are the solutions? Because I believe that a lot of the times they're the ones closely dealing with clients. So they're the ones closely seeing what is the feedback that's happening. And a lot of the times there are also the rich pond of answers to those problems. So to me, my position as a leader, my job as a leader is to extract these things from them, is to bring forth from them and to make them realize that they are able to do this critical thinking. They're able to bring these great ideas to something. And I think also one of the things that to me is important is I believe that high tide brings up all ships.
Mm,
So I need them to understand, and I am a firm investor in, if I'm doing well, the business is doing well, then by nature, you guys will also do well and you guys will do better. And one of the exercises that we do at the company is every quarter or so, we'll sit down and we'll write letters to ourselves and the companies for December. So,
wow.
what do you visualize, not just for the company, but for yourself and your family come December of 2025? You
Wow.
know, and it's 2025 December looking back. So, um, I started and I tell them, like, talk about how much do you want to make?
Wow.
Talk about the responsibilities that you would like to have in the company. Talk about the impact of a higher income in your family, in your household. What would that allow you to do? Because to me, a business is a means for you to have more time with your family. I say that all the time. I work and I don't want to work harder. I want to work smarter, to work less so that I can buy my time with my family. I believe in that. And I want my employees to also be working with the goal to be with their families and not to be more in the office, you know?
So
So,
they write this letter, this in this exercise. I find it
yep,
fascinating, by the way, that you make them do this exercise on such a constant basis. And then at the end of the year, do you give them the letters for them to read it? How does that work? Or do they get to keep the letters and read it any day that they want?
we read it together.
Wow. So you keep it and then you bring it out at the end of the year?
Yep, because we we all need to understand that as an organism, as an ecosystem, we are an intricate part of each other's goals and each
Wow.
other's like futures for as long as we are together. So it's important for us to understand how we are impacting each other's lives.
Wow. That's incredible. So Larissa, you're a CEO with two kids, right? And you want five. That's the last, the number
Yes.
you've last shared with me. Why that vision for your family? You know, knowing how challenging it is to bring up kids nowadays, knowing how intense it is to be a CEO, and wanting more time, as you say, for the family. You know, it's you definitely want to invest a lot in your husband. You said that's your priority. Why have five kids?
So I don't think I can tell you why that number.
Okay.
It would always have been either three or five, because I don't believe in even number children, because then you don't have a democracy, because you can't have votes. Like there's never a, a breaker, a tiebreaker, because it's an even number. So it's always been an odd number. It was never going to be one. And I've just had a brother,
Right.
and it wasn't boring by any means. It was always like we played together. But I used to see families with more children, like three, four, and it was just so fun for the children, of course, since, it is from a perspective of a kid looking at other kids playing with more siblings. But then as I grew up, and I think this also is based on my faith, yes, it is much harder to raise kids nowadays. And a lot of people are like, oh, it's expensive, and it's this, and it's that. And for anyone that knows my story knows that I was in labor with my daughter for 5 days, and I was in labor with my son for 2 weeks. Both of them ended up in C-sections. And people turn around to me and they're like, you would still want to have a baby? Like another one? And the answer is yes, because number one, my husband and I, we play, but it's a very based on truth thing that we say to our children, is that we love each other so much that as the love multiplies, it's almost impossible to just pour it just into them. So we have to have another kid because it's just so much love. And it kind of fights the idea of having to divide. For a long time, there was this concept that like, oh, when I have more siblings, I have to divide things, and I have to, you multiply. Right. And when I understood that, I'll tell you something. Since I had my first daughter, and now with my son, my business has never been better. And I'm not telling you that I'm working harder, but there is just this principle of multiplication that exists in the universe when your focus is love and not cash. And it took me a while to understand that, because anytime I focus on the cash flow problem, it's awful, because it seems like everything just disappears.
Right.
And I'm not talking about planning, okay? I'm not talking, oh, don't plan. No, that's not what I'm saying. But whenever I focus on my family and what really matters, it's kind of like that biblical verse, like you take care of the kingdom and all other things shall be added unto you. And that has been my most honest experience. So with that base, I'm not afraid of having more children, because I truly do believe that, number one, work is a curse, okay? Like, to begin with, it's a necessary evil, but that the blessing is truly in your family unit. The blessing is truly taking care of my family, having more kids, and creating this engine that's going to pay for my time to be with them. And a lot of people think that I'm crazy. And that the only reason my kids do not attend your networking breakfast is because you said no children, because or else they would be there too. But they haven't hindered me from doing the CEO thing. If anything, they have inspired me to use my time wisely, because I know how long their nap time is. So I know the time frame that I need to work with. And it gives me a sense of urgency to get the work done well the first time around, so that I don't need to bother my nights with work stuff. I don't need to bother my weekends with work. I'm fully present. And when I first opened my business, I was talking to a business consultant, and he was like, Larissa, what are some of your business goals? And I told him my business goal is to be able to cook dinner at least 3 times a week, and to drop off my kids at school, and pick my kids up from school in the afternoon. And he turned around to me and he said, that's not a business goal. And I told him very clearly, if you don't understand that that's a business goal, number one, you're not the business consultant for me. And number two, if my business is not providing this, then that's the wrong business for me.
Wow. Such a clarity in priorities that you bring into every conversation. I've seen that in how you talk to the board. And clearly that's how you talk to your team when you're doing these letters and you say, what I want for myself is what I want for all of you. And if you're not wanting that extra time for your family, if you're not wanting that extra income to provide better for your family, you're in the wrong company.
Right.
That's amazing. Larissa, you showed up to Leading Peers board meetings through your pregnancy. And the last trimester, you just talked about it, your labor for your child took 2 weeks, and ended up in a C-section. Early motherhood with your last baby, with Liam, you went through postpartum. You've talked about that very openly. Why was it important for you not to miss? I mean, anybody else would have probably said, I need to just take 6 months off, get out of this, and see if I can come back and when I can come back. You didn't miss a beat. You even did your peer-to-peer meetings. I remember seeing you at socials with Liam just born. Why was it so important for you not to miss?
Because I was on my postpartum and my business wasn't going to wait until I survived postpartum. And honestly, I felt like Leading Peers was a safe environment for me to be there just as I was, however I was, and I was going to be accepted. And going also brought a sense of sanity to a moment that everything was so unbalanced. So to me, it was of utmost importance for me to continue to participate, for me to continue to be there so that I would also have hope that I would see myself again.
Wow, it's incredible. And I remember you breastfeeding through the meetings and asking, is this okay? And everybody saying, absolutely. So
Yeah.
It was as real as it got. Now, you've been hosting the board in your office. We meet there for the last year or so. Has it been harder to be vulnerable and open while hosting meetings with your team and family nearby? I mean, just behind the door, as we shut the door, there's people in your family. I've seen your husband there. I've seen your dad. Your kids are there. I've definitely seen your staff who are like family, come in and out of the room. Has it been hard for you to be vulnerable, knowing that they are just outside the door and talk openly about what you're going through?
No, not really, just because that's how I am with them. I learned early on that number one, for my business, I needed to have people around that I could be vulnerable. I am not the tough exterior, don't talk to me, don't come close to me kind of person. So I needed to have people that I could trust around me. So the same vulnerability that I'm able to have with you guys is the same vulnerability a lot of times that I'm able to have with them because of this, team mentality that I have. So I don't know if you've played soccer, but,
Yeah.
If you're the team captain, I don't need to tell you that we're losing because you're going to see it. The scoreboard is right there. So I need my team to be able to see the scoreboard, but then as the captain, I need to be able to tell them we can do it. We can turn this around. So these are their, tough defenders. The goalie's really weak on this side, and this is the strategy that we need to get through their defense and score the amount of goals either to tie or to turn it around. And if we go to the penalty kicks, then these are the members that are, strongest in this. So the rest of you that are not kicking, I need you guys to be support. So I don't need to hide things, and that's why to me, it always goes back to sports. It always goes back to team sports. In jiu-jitsu, it may seem like a lonely sport because it's just you fighting the other opponent. But I've gotten so used to having my teammates and my coach on the outside because they're able to see things that I'm not able to see as I'm in. So as I'm fighting, it sounds crazy, but I can't hear anyone else but them.
Wow.
and I can respond in the middle of the fight to them talking to me. And that's the same thing that I bring to my team. Like sometimes they're seeing things that I'm not seeing, and I'm seeing things that they're not seeing. And there needs to be that communication. There needs to be that vulnerability. Recently, one of my employees messaged me to tell me that she's pregnant. And, she's very anxious because she's worried about her job. I'm like, first of all, it's wrong that you are worried about losing your job because you're pregnant. And I get it that you're the newest member, so you don't understand that you don't need to be nervous about this.
Yeah.
Because I only hire women, and most of them are married with kids, because I believe in having that flexibility to raise your kids. So, that vulnerability and that openness is a part of what I believe in.
Yeah, it's incredible. You talk about feeling comfortable that they're on the other side because you are transparent, because they know the numbers, they know what's happening. And so you build this trust with your team, just like you do with your family and with your peer board, by being real, by sharing what's really happening, and surrounding yourself with people that you can trust with that realness. If
Yes.
you can't trust them, or you feel that they're going to take you in a direction like that consultant that doesn't align with your priorities, then you replace them with people that you can trust, you can be real with, you can share what's really happening. So that's amazing. Larissa, we've had an incredible conversation, and there's so many other things that I could have talked with you about today. You've been a big presence in social media. I would have loved to talk about what you've done with it. In a world where a lot of people say, business owners shouldn't be on social media. You should get out of that. It's a waste. It's a time suck. It's not going to take you anywhere. And I definitely could talk with you about artificial intelligence and automation. I know you're doing a lot in that area.
Yep.
As one of our younger CEOs in the organization, now in your mid 30s. Even though you have 6 years of experience, you're still just in your mid 30s. And I would love to leave that for a future episode, maybe.
Absolutely.
I'd love to talk about, our connection, having a similar background, and that's certainly something that's been in my mind. Something that created a connection with us, and how that affected your interest in leading peers. There's so many other things about you being disadvantaged, being a female, black immigrant, and the way you came, that I would love to dig deeper into. But I want to end this episode by asking you, is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wished you would have been able to share in this episode about yourself, about your trajectory, about your journey, about what you've learned, about your leadership? Is there anything that you want us to end with?
I think the most important thing is, don't allow your past failures to dictate whether or not you will reach success. You know, if you don't fail, then you're not trying. You're just standing there. And that's something that I have had to learn and accept, because culturally, I used to think that if I fail, then that's it. It's the end of the world. But one of the things that my dad told me earlier on was, if you didn't die, then you just get up and you keep trying.
Mm-hmm.
You just keep moving and you keep trying and you keep adjusting and you keep tweaking things and you just keep moving forward, because the only thing that you cannot change is death. Other than that, everything else is survivable.
Yeah.
In life, in business. So don't allow your past failures to dictate if you're going to be successful or not, because if you're failing, it means they're at least you're trying. And there are a lot of people that nowadays are too afraid even to try. So you've already overcome a huge thing by just taking that first step. Now don't stop.
I'm so glad you're passing on that message. And you, by all means, embody what it means to be resilient. Having gone through the move here as an 11-year-old, having gone through being illegal, having gone through all of the challenges with sports, with the military, with being left out of a business that you thought you were going to be an employee in and having to start a company. And then the very next year, having to deal with COVID and thinking it was going to go under. And right as it starts to surface, you have a massive meltdown over your personal involvement with your clients and how to deal with all that. And you thought you were going to lose yourself over the process. And now you're in a better place now with your husband, with your 2 kids, with an amazing group. I can tell you the peer board is there for you, and you've earned that trust and that companionship and that true love for what you're building. And you're building an amazing company. Your employees feel like family. Every time I'm with them, it feels like they're an extension, and that reflects so highly the vision. I know you have a big vision for your business. I know that what you're building is going to employ more people. It's going to bring more kids of theirs into the office, integrate them into the fold. Thank you so much for your friendship. Thank you so much for your commitment to leading peers, and for sharing your story as real as you always are with all of us. Thank you, Larissa.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure, and I will definitely see you on our next segment of this interview.